you have to then go back to your own company and realize why is there no value in this? Why does nobody want it? And we try to do our due diligence ahead of time to make sure that all of those bases were covered.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I'm your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Today, my guest, she was a co-founder and longtime CEO of Portfolio Creative, where she was recognized for her leadership as Columbus CEO's most admired CEO for 5 straight years. Also, she was recognized in her career as being a most influential entrepreneur, Smart Woman Progressive Entrepreneur Award, Smart 50 Award, Business First Influential Woman to Know, 6 years honored on Inc. 500, 5,000 fastest growing companies. She sold her business and is now sharing her insights through Catherine Lang-Cline, LLC, on navigating business as a female business owner, through speaking engagements, articles, and her book, The Rules of the Game for Women in Business. Her podcast, The Secret Art of Business, focuses on your passions to benefit your executive life. Please welcome my guest today, Catherine Lang-Cline, to the show. Catherine, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining.
I am doing really great, and I'm very excited to be talking to your listeners today.
I'm going to take a breath. That was a long introduction. Very storied career. So yeah, really excited. And we were connected through mutual contacts. And I love your story, which we're going to dive in here today. But tell us a little bit about your company that you started, longtime CEO of Portfolio Creative. Just tell us a little bit about that. Just to kind of lay the foundation for our conversation here today.
Absolutely. I started out my career, if you will, with a BFA. So I was an artist. I still am, I guess, and got into marketing and advertising because you can't make any money as an artist. Had a very great career for 15 years, worked for Fortune 100 companies for their advertising and marketing, and then realized there was this kind of gap where people were doing placements, recruiting and part-time freelance work, but there was no organization to it whatsoever. So, and I freelanced a lot. I hired a lot of freelancers. And at one point, somebody that I worked with said it would be great if somebody could start a company that would just make this process a lot faster. So I started Portfolio Creative, where we would find people for advertising and marketing roles and because we were in the business, we knew specifically what these clients needed and just started placing people. And I did that for about 20 years.
And 20 years, fast forward to 20 years, you decided to sell your company.
Yes.
What led you to, selling it, and why at that point in your life and the life cycle of your business, why did you want to sell at that point?
Well, as people know that own businesses, there's a lot of challenges that come up. And for the most part, I loved the problem solving of it. Even when we were going through a pandemic, it was very stressful. However, when you solved problems, it was really, really great. And I kind of felt like after 20 years, I have done it. In order to keep it going, you really had to continue to have that passion for it. And as I stated, mine was in art and really creating things. And I never dreamed I would be a CEO. Worked out that way. And that was a whole different challenge. So I started talking to my financial advisor about an exit, and we worked the numbers. And she said, well, Catherine, you really don't have to work if you don't want to. And I was like, well, then why am I working? But I saw that as a great opportunity to maybe try something else. A visionary mind is a very troubled one, and you like to try different things all the time and challenge yourself. So I was like, you know what, I can let this go and sell to somebody that can maybe even take it to the next level and be perfectly fine with that and try something else. So that was a little bit of a crossroad in that regard, where it was a moment where I was like, am I ready? Financially I'm ready. So let's just go.
Yeah. How long had you been thinking about that before you decided, yep, now's the time?
Well, it was a couple of years because I had talked to mentors and other people about the process. And they said, if this is something that you want to do, you have to make the company as pretty as possible. And that includes you not being a part of it. This company has to run without you. And we started it with our face, and our reputation. So it was very closely tied to it. But so it took a couple of years to kind of separate myself from the day-to-day, to have my employees be the ones that the clients meet with continuously. I worked in the background a lot. And I would say it was probably about 2 years or so to get that ready, to do the delegation and the moving. and then just start the process of working with an M&A person to basically make like the for sale sheet and see who would go for it.
So who gave you the advice that you wanna get out of the business, make sure you can rely on the people in your business to run the things? Who did you talk to about that?
I talked to one of my mentors for that. He was very seasoned in helping people go through this process,
Yeah.
not so much the sales process, but the part about getting ready. And as I'm sure a lot of your guests are aware, selling a business, it involves a team of people to kind of get you to where you need to go, because he was very good at the mental part of it. It's like, these are things, you have to let some of these things go. You have to be okay with moving on. Are you sure you want to do this? So it was, and kind of getting the mindset ready, and then having me to understand who I would need to plug in to actually make this happen. Because I think a lot of people get really caught up with that letting go part. It's like, this is something that you created. It's almost like handing over your child to somebody else. Matter of fact, it's almost exactly like that. And, and deciding it's worth deciding, was it, the value of it and things like that. It just involves so many different aspects of it. So just having someone on the ground floor just to ask, are you ready, was really, really helpful.
If you can speculate a little bit here and imagine you didn't have that mentor who told you that gave you that advice, because that's great advice, and you had a 2-year runway to get there, which is atypical. Where do you think how do you think that process would have gone?
It would have been probably a horrible mess, because we had people approach us in the past saying, hey, we're interested in buying your company. And we started doing that dance a little bit, and you found out pretty quickly that people were going to take advantage of you in many, many ways. And, they're going to try to get the best deal possible, and they're going to want you to hang on as long as possible and things like that. So, but having that prep was huge, because I did not have to hang around for years because my clients only knew me, sort of thing, which you can sometimes get caught in though. And if you're the owner of a company, the last thing you want to do is really work for somebody else. So get out as soon as you can. So to have that strategy was fantastic. To have it where people were constantly telling you this is worth something, because if you don't, you have people wanting to buy it saying, well, they're kicking the tires. These tires look a little old, and I don't know about, I don't know if it's worth all of this. So to have all of that, just be mentally prepared to stand your ground, to have people back you up. I mean, it was absolutely huge, because we probably would have sold it for a discount or got totally frustrated and just closed it or something like that. But to really have that mindset of, this is a business, it has value, you need to fight for every dollar, none of that would have happened if I didn't have all of that prep work.
Yeah. Just imagine thinking about just selling that. We call that the unsolicited offer. You get just a random buyer reach out to you and say, I want to buy your business for this. What would that process have gone if you try to do it yourself?
We would definitely not have gotten as much as we wanted or what it was worth. We probably would have been, pretty mentally beat up and slightly humiliated. Because the thing is too, when you own a business, you feel on one level, you feel like it's just so valuable, like, this is going to be worth millions of dollars. It isn't. Or I should say it isn't. I mean, we did very well with the sale, but so you have to, that reality kind of creeps in. But if you have somebody who is constantly telling you what's wrong with it, you start believing it. And then you start getting into, you're like, okay, maybe I'm stuck. We're this far. Maybe I'm stuck doing this deal. When we have somebody who's done it before, they're like, no, you're not. You're not stuck at all. Here's what's going to happen. They kind of straighten that out for you. But yeah, the not knowing how to do it is the most dangerous thing. Right. And, and I suppose you could try and do it yourself, but I would just say, get all the information from everybody you possibly know. But, it was paying the money, I will say, for people to help me. It was worth every dime.
A ringing endorsement for the M&A profession, as he said, it was worth the money, because you also have to run the business and try to sell the business.
Yes.
And our profession is a full-time job. So basically you'd be having 2 full-time jobs and probably not loving it.
Yeah. And the prep work needed for that ends up being a full-time job if you don't have somebody who's really helping you through that. Absolutely.
Right. When, so you got the advice, you decided, yep, that was the time. When did you start? Because this varies, by owner to owner. When did you include your team, your key employees, or maybe the people who are going to stick around and kind of, with the next, company? When did you include them in this process, and why? Why
we
then?
waited to the very, very last minute. under the advice of our M&A person. He said, you can blame me if they get upset about that, because we'd always had a very open and honest relationship with everybody on our team. Like, they could see the financials, that's not everything, but what they needed to know as far as progress. And, our conversations were very open, and to not tell them was almost painful. But we were advised, unless we need somebody absolutely positively to be involved in this, nobody must know. And like I said, while it was painful, it was wise, because the minute we did tell people, panic starts happening, and you have to kind of reassure, no, but it's all taken care of. You're all going to be fine. The person's going to meet with you. And it's almost a little bit like, shock and awe, where they don't have a whole lot of time to react, because you do want them to go along with this, but it's like, you don't want people to suddenly start to leave, because you're selling the whole package. You're selling that these people are going to be here, and we want you to make them an offer. Everybody needs to be made an offer. And that's what we told them as well. The owner's going to meet with you. You will be made an offer to stay. It can be decided down the road later whether or not they decide to keep somebody, but they had to at least know that everything was going to be okay. But it was super challenging, but I understood the science of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would imagine that's very difficult, because kind of got this secret life behind the rest of the company
Exactly.
that you're trying to hide. But you mentioned you had confided in your financial advisor to understand if now is the right time.
Yes.
Out of all the people you could talk to, and obviously you talked to your mentor too, that you had referenced before, but out of all the people you could talk to, I'm just curious, why did you go there first?
Because I feel that if I'm working for myself, I have to have a retirement plan. And there were so many people that I knew that would just make a ton of money and maybe buy another house, a third house, or they would buy all these other things. They'd reinvest in the company, which, if you know what you're doing, if what you want to do to expand it, to build value, yes. But my whole plan up at the beginning was to make myself financially stable. I wanted to retire, and I wanted to retire early. And I was really focused on making sure that I had enough money to do so. So having these conversations with my financial advisor, she knew what I wanted, and it was just a matter of, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then finally she was like, yeah, you can do it if you want. And that was the big choice from her, if you want. And because I felt like I had at least one or two more chapters still of things that I wanted to do, I'm like, you know what? I have worked hard. I can reward myself and all of my hard work by stepping away from this and go on and do something that is even more exciting. Yeah, that was so key for me, because I felt safe at that point. It didn't matter what I sold the company for. Also, I was good, and everything else was bonus. So, all the money that we made from selling the company just got added to it actually, was put towards sustaining that bridge between then and 65. So I didn't have to worry about any of that either. And that took a lot of the pressure off the sale of the company, because a lot of people wait for that last minute, and they're like, when I sell, I'm going to have all the money I need and everything's going to be great. But what if you don't, and to have that security first, for me, at least the way that I'm wired, was so important.
At what point, before you decided, yes, we're going to do this now, was that like the final tipping point that like, yep, I'm ready to go? How soon before that did you have that conversation with your financial advisor?
That part just is a little bit of a blur, because after that was said, it kind of went fast. I also had a business partner at the time too. And we had decided very much early on that if I go, you go, if you stay, I stay. And we were kind of doing this because we loved it. It was definitely us. And when I said, what, I think I'm done, I've talked to my financial advisor. I can do this. And if you want to stay, that's fine. But she's like, oh, I'm not staying if you're not here. So it was a pretty deep pact in that regard. And I said, well, you know what? You talk to your financial advisor. And if you're good, let's just do this. First, she was a little hesitant because we've done this for so long, but I have spoken to her recently, and she's living her best life now. So I gave her a little bit of a nudge. But yeah, once we were like, okay, let's do it, we started immediately talking to people. All right, how are we going to make this happen? Mm-hmm. And for me, I was kind of working behind the scenes prior to having that conversation with her to delegate as much away as I could. And what was interesting too is because of that, she ended up and wanted to stay on a little bit longer. But yeah, my prep work had started a little bit before hers did.
What was the hardest thing mentally for you to deal with or go through during the exit process?
Um, I think it was just a lot of, is this going to be okay? It was a fantastic gig being, your own boss with a very successful company. And it was just a matter of, do I want to just keep pushing this, And I felt like, I've done it. I've worked my whole life. I've always been very scrappy and very driven. And I would like to, like I said, just breathe, for a little bit and really enjoy all the hard work I put in by just doing the things that I wanted to do. And that was a huge mental switch because I have always worked so hard. Somebody had said, you have some sort of survival skill kicking in where you're like you're fighting for your life every day almost. And I think that starts with, when you grow up not having a lot, you're always afraid of losing everything.
Right.
So you're like, that's not going to happen. Not on my watch. I'm going to keep pushing, push, push, push. And to just have it stop, I mean, was like someone finally just said, Catherine, you've done enough, and you can do what you want now, which, was a little bit of madness, but it was a gift that kind of keeps on giving at this point.
Did you see like this part or a part of you or your identity was kind of tied up into the business? Was that hard to
Oh
kind of
my gosh. Yeah. It was, I mean, my face was everywhere. I was, the front face, my business partner, we always referred to it. I was the outside voice and she was the inside voice. So she did a lot of the spreadsheets and all the things that I hated dealing with, HR issues. And I was the one that was doing the marketing and the leading. And so I was always out there networking and things like that. So yeah, it was every relationship I made for the last 20 years was based on me being the owner of this business and how that could be a catalyst to maybe help the community or things like that. So that was probably the toughest pill to swallow, just in that too was going to stop. And, how do you stay credible? How do you stay useful? How do you stay, popular? But I had eventually had to I was like, and that's kind of where the book kind of came into, where it's like, I could keep doing this till I die. But what if I wrote a book and told people how I did it? And therefore they can then take the baton and I can feel like I can slowly step back into just, a quiet life because I've given everything at that point. So it's a little bit of a test for yourself and what you want to do, I guess, or what your legacy wants to be. And your legacy could be, you worked to the day that you died and you helped all these people do great things on your team, or you did some really great things, you left a good legacy, and, you also live your own life too.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. So you said you were able to build this team around you. You hired an M&A advisory firm. I'm assuming you had attorney, accountant, everybody.
Oh,
You're
yes.
obviously a financial advisor, and which is smart. How did you choose an M&A firm to represent you? How did you find out about M&A advisors, and why they exist, and I guess take us through that process.
Well, having had the courtship of not having one, we got to the point where like, you know what, we're going to need some help on this. And
Mhm.
I want to say that was one of the things that my mentor told me about, which these are the things you're going to need.
Yeah.
And at that time, I kind of just ran into him at this event. And he was like, I was like, I'm thinking about, he said what he did. I said, I'm thinking about selling my business. He goes, well, let's talk. And we started having a conversation. He was, very a small company. We didn't do anything super large, which for us was great because companies can be hundreds of millions of dollars. We were just merely millions, and so that size was really great. And then I was very diligent in doing background checks and things like that. Who has he worked with before? Have they been satisfied? You basically dig in deep and make sure that they have a successful track record. And I would even advise that for if you're working with a large company too, because you could work with somebody and say they were just terrible to work with. They did not treat me as important or their most important client, or they cost me like twice what somebody else would have cost. And when we spoke with our lawyers about this and we had them read the contract and that sort of thing, and they said, you know what, this is actually a really good deal. Other companies would charge you a lot more. He's got the backing. We'll be here in the background and we'll move forward with this. So it was even kind of nice to have that, having a good lawyer read all those contracts before we got into a relationship that ended up being trouble. So
yeah, right. That's smart. Having a good M&A attorney on your side is also a good move. What was important for you, to get out of the sale of the business? Everybody loves a bunch of money at close, but there's a lot of other things that are important to business owners besides that. Obviously, that's great to have, but what was important for you going through this process, selling your company, to get out of it outside of any sort of I guess we're talking about like structure of the deal, your employees, your legacy, like all those, like what was important for you once you sold to be like, look back and be like, this is what I wanted to get out of this?
yeah, I think I touched upon it a little bit in where I said I wanted to make sure the team was taken care of, and asked you, I please interview all the people. I want you to take them all and let them say no if they don't want to come along, because they were all fantastic. He was not going to
Yeah.
get a dud in the bunch. And he agreed to that. And the other part was I wanted the final check money process to be as quick as possible. And the way that was structured, we would be totally out with, we have all our cash in about 2 years. Sometimes that people will extend that even longer. Like I said, they will want the CEO to stay on longer. For me, it was about, if I'm giving this up, I know what's best for me, and it's not lingering. It's not going head to head with another CEO or having my team confused because I'm there every day. Well, who do I talk to? Who do I ask? That's your boss now. I'm going to be here over in this little desk. And if you have any questions, for a few months, but they didn't, because I had set that up. So there was very few questions on my part. I mostly had to just occasionally talk to clients or whatever because I had that history. But it was very little lifting for me because if I was done, I wanted to be out fast. So I want to make sure that was a part of it. And that, and like I said, that making sure the team was all going to go or given the opportunity to stay was basically the two things that I really, really wanted.
When you look at, which is good that they're able to accomplish that for you. And that's always, putting what you want in mind when working on a sale, kind of keeping that at the forefront is something that's important, obviously, to you, and glad that was the case. What did you think about, as you're looking at, working with your advisor on the potential buyers, who is the right fit? What was important to you? Was it, a strategic buyer, a competitor, someone in the business? Was it a financial buyer? Did you have an opinion either way? Like, kind of take us through your thought process on that and how you guys built that list based on who you thought would be the best fit for your company.
Yeah, it was really about just keeping that whole dream alive, if you will. So we started this because we wanted to have artists get fair pay, have great fits, and if somebody could take that on, that was really kind of all that we asked for. So we had a company that did exactly what that we did. They placed creative people, much larger than us. So they would have been a nice plug-in just because it would just be more clients for them, essentially. And we knew that our talent and our clients could be taken care of because they've done this before. The one that we ended up with was a staffing company that was more left brain connected. And I like that option too, because then with AI coming in, you had to have a little more flexibility with that crossover of, computers at its most original form, plus the creative side too. So that ended up being a better fit for us. It was a much smaller company. They wanted just the growth and expand into the creative space with what they knew as far as AI coming down the path too. So that's the one that ended up being the right choice for us.
Good. Appreciate that insight. It's always hard to know like who to go with. So it sounds like you had a couple offers, couple options.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to you have choices. How important was that for you too? Because as an M&A advisor, that's always the goal. Like, we want to give our clients options.
Right.
I would imagine that was nice to have.
Yes. Because the other option would be we would have gotten no offers, and then we would have been
Or
like, well, I guess we're
even
going
one
to do this
offer
for a
too.
while.
Well, even one offer, like, okay, then you're kind of, you feel like you have to, or you're like, you're
Yeah.
not as
It's like,
excited
well,
or whatever, if it's not a good deal, right?
yeah, exactly. Well, then you're also going to decide if that's the only offer we got and it's not a great deal. I mean, I look at it as, what are we doing wrong? Because you have to then go back to your own company and realize, why is there no value in this? Why does nobody want it? And we try to do our due diligence ahead of time to make sure that all of those bases were covered. But yeah, there could have been a lot of little slip ups that we did that would made it a lot less attractive. Like, for example, we could have a revenue of millions of dollars, but if the profit was small, why would somebody be interested in that? They want to make money if they're going to buy it. So there's just little things like that. Actually, it's not a little thing, but there are things like that that make the company less attractive. That's why I said we had to make this as attractive as possible before we even show it to anybody. Well, if they buy this, they will make money.
Yeah. Right. And so, what advice would you, so being on, the other side of an exit, ran your company for 20 years, had a successful sale, now moving on to the next phase of your life. Looking back, what advice would you give other business owners to prep them for, one, considering and knowing when to, sell, and two, any couple of pieces of advice that you would recommend during the process that really helped you out or surprised you, or they could benefit from your experience?
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to say first is that to really treat it as a business that has value. You've worked very hard to do something, and you should get money from it, for somebody buying it. I say that because I know a number of people, or a few people, I should say, that decided that they were done and just closed. And I was like, well, why would you just walk away from that? It's kind of like, well, I don't like this car anymore, so I'm just going to leave it here on the side of the road. I was like, you can get something for that. So always come with that perspective. I have created something that people trust. I have clients. Somebody's going to find some value in this, and really think about how much you can get out of that, because you need to be rewarded for that, all that hard work and all that investment. I find it very sad when, like I said, when people sell themselves short as well. So just don't think, too grandiose about it, but really talk to somebody about what the value of your company is, and that's really helpful too, because sometimes that gets away from us too. We're just doing the work and we're not realizing, one, that we're not really profitable, or two, that we're super profitable and we don't realize it. Because when you're the owner, you are so in it, especially if you're the founder. Because you started with nothing, and the next thing you know, somebody's telling you that your company is worth, millions of dollars, or you have millions of dollars in revenue, and you're like, well, how the heck did this happen? Getting out of that mindset of that you're a startup and you're still just struggling along is a huge hump you have to get past too. The other thing is, don't undervalue that team you need to put together, because that is freaking huge. It does cost you money. It is not cheap, but it's worth every penny. To have somebody who has done this before walk you through it and help you get as much as you can out of it. They're just as invested as you are, because they want to have a good story at the end of the day too. And it was so wonderful to have somebody just say, okay, here's what we're going to do next. One of the things that was great working with an M&A person is that he very volunteered to be the bad guy and everything. I'm going to call them and I'm going to push for an answer, because time kills all deals. And the longer that they wait to get back to us, that deal, they're thinking about other things at that point. We got to keep them focused. So to have somebody do that was fantastic, because would be challenging to say, are you going to buy it or not? If you're the owner, you're like, but if you have a bad guy, it's so much easier. And the same thing with like the lawyers. So I read this contract and here's the problem that I have. And, you might be like, well, maybe I'm okay with it, just to get this closed. And they're telling you, no, we're not okay with it. And we're going to push this back, and they're going to do it again. So like I said, to have that help when you normally don't have that help, because usually you're just in the front lines and you're trying to keep the doors open of your own business or grow your own business. But to have that higher level of knowledge, like I said, it's so, so worth it.
I appreciate those insights, Catherine. It's always
And you
good
can
to
do it.
hear.
You can do it. I think a lot of people too think like,
Yeah.
I never dreamed I would. I never dreamed I would be a CEO, but guess what? I was. I never dreamed I would have a company and sell it, but guess what? It happened. So
Yeah.
you get comfortable with that. The greater the reward's going to be.
Right. And you wrote a book because of it, Rules of the
Yeah.
Game for Women in Business. Tell us a little bit about your book. Why'd you write it? Who's it for? Why should people go get it?
Well, technically, anybody can benefit from it, but I found that if it had more of a female focus, it would probably sell better because there aren't that many books that are like that. At least as I was advised, but I would definitely guarantee, if anybody wanted to read it. But the idea of it was, it's not meant to be like this inspirational biography that I did. Guess what I did, sort of thing. It is more of a, here are the mistakes that I made, here are the struggles that I had, and here's how I get over them. And it's essentially a playbook of how that basically that you can follow. And a lot of it is based on my discovery fairly early in my career as a CEO, that technically all the guys in the room are playing sports. And that like they always are, because they were in this business a lot longer than women. And I think sometimes women come in and think, I'm going to come in and they're going to play by my rules. No, they have been here longer. You got to learn how to play by their rules. And once you do, the momentum of your career goes so much faster. And I use examples like when people talk about business, there are scorecards and there are coaches and there are team meetings and there are huddles and there are all these things. They're all sports related things. So get yourself, first of all, really familiar with that sort of language. And then it all starts changing, because essentially everybody in business wants to win. It's a competition, whether you like it or not. It's not collaborative, and it's not, what women would tend to lean towards. We should all work together and raise all ships and stuff. No, it's a competition, and everybody wants their team to win. So if you show up as a good player, as an MVP, you are asked to do more things. You're asked to be in more rooms. You're asked to meet other people. And that was a little bit of my strategy, that once I figured that out and got out of my own head as far as this other stuff, which is all covered in the book, I give people the exact things that I said and that I did to make it so I could be a better player, not just for myself being competitive, but for the community as a whole, because then everybody wanted me on their team. They're like, who we need to have on this is Catherine, because she shows up, she's good at what she does, she plays like a pro, and all of it is sports terminology. And for the ladies, I have all footnotes in there. When I use sports terms, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you are completely ignorant about sports ball, this will it'll start resonating, because especially if you're a mom that has kids, you've been to enough sporting events to know some of the things. So it's not to treat people with an ignorance, but it's just more to connect the dots of, oh, you see that also happens in business. So we're going to do that too. And one of my favorite examples is, if I can just indulge you for a moment,
Absolutely.
is that, women tend to be so offended when they're in a meeting and then they get interrupted. And I realized, oh, wait a second, this is how the game is played, though. The guys are interrupting themselves, too. They're not just interrupting the women. It's everybody doing this. And it's a little bit like basketball, where the person who has the ball scores. So guess what? Everybody's going to fight for it, no matter what. And elbows are going to be thrown, and there might be a few bloody noses, but you can assist and you can steal the ball back and you can do whatever. But if you take that sort of mentality, it's not so offensive and you don't feel like you're being pushed back. You're in it and you're like, darn it, I'm going to get that ball back because he stole it from me, and I have tips on how you do that with grace and with a smile.
Grace, yeah. Instead of my sheer force.
Exactly. Oh, this is happening. That's kind of like my attitude. Oh, this is happening. I'm getting that ball back, but I did it with a smile, and you got to come back and play again.
I love that analogy. I love that. Where can we find your book?
It is on everywhere where books are sold. You go to my website, which is catherinelangcline.com, and that has links to Barnes & Noble and to Amazon, but it is available in some small bookstores. It is available at Books A Million and all sorts of places like that. So yeah, it's like a real book. It's out there.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for joining the show today. I learned a lot from you. I know our audience did as well, especially our business owners who are listening to the podcast, and just gaining some confidence in your experience that they can do this, and that, they have some good pieces of advice to prepare themselves, the business, for this process. And I think, really appreciate you being open and honest about that. So thank you so much for sharing your story with our group, and appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely my pleasure. I really appreciated you having me on today.
That's all we have for this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Please like, share, and comment on this episode. Pass it on to anybody who you think might benefit from our conversation. Make sure to click that notification button, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get podcasts. And make sure you get notified when a brand new episode, typically every Thursday morning, airs, and stay tuned into all the episodes that we have. Go back and check out previous ones. There's a lot of great content about M&A and the process and from experts that I've had on the show, like Catherine is here today. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.